Happy Monday to you guys. We're going to talk about the French Revolution today. I'm going to keep it pretty brief for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I like to keep the video short so that you can get your work done. Remember, just a reminder for the week and from now on that your assignments are due on Sunday at 11:59 for each unit. So just keep that in mind. If you have any issues or need help, let Miss McCray know. So today we're going to talk about the French Revolution. Before spring break, we talked about revolutions and we talked about the four stages of their symptoms of incubation, symptomatic stage, crisis stage, and then convalescence. So those are the four stages. And when we look at the French Revolution today, I'm going to talk to you about the events, but I kind of want you to be reflective of what do you think would be like an incubation period, what would be a symptomatic stage where we see symptoms of the revolution, the crisis where there's full blown out physical altercations or change, and then the convalescence, which means that the country that's having the revolution is on the mend. So, going to keep it pretty brief today. So, there's going to be some causes to a revolution. Remember, the word revolution means to bring about change. Sometimes revolutions can be change in the sense of like the Neolithic Revolution where we switched to farming, but the French Revolution is actually going to have a physical war. Very similar to the American Revolution, but a lot of times people don't deem the French Revolution as successful as the American Revolution, and I'll tell you why. So, first reason is going to be inequalities from the old order. There will be three social classes during this time, okay? You'll have the first estate, the second estate, and the third estate. The first estate is going to consist of the church and the clergy, okay? So, that's going to be the Catholic Church during this time, the Pope, all of those people are going to be considered the upper level, upper echelon. Also in the church, in the first estate, will also be the king or the monarch. So when you add this to your notes, you may want to add the fact that the king is part of it. Don't mind all the little racket, but I got two dogs that are running around the house. Okay, so you may hear little dog tags clicking and little paws running, so please excuse it. So the second estate will be the nobles. Nobles are wealthy people. They're businessmen, very well educated, people that have money that come from families of money. Then you have the third estate, which is the common people. So Miss McCray is not going to get in the weeds with all these groups as far as all these details, but one thing that's really important in this chart is the money, more money and power going up, the population and tax burdens bigger going down. So let me explain something. 97% of the population was the third estate, and you need to add that to your chart because you're going to put this chart in your notes. 97% of the population. The second estate was 2%. The church and the king were 1%. But let me explain who paid the most taxes. The third estate, which is interesting because they are commoners, which means they do not have the money to pay the most taxes. So this population is the largest, but makes the least amount of money. That's going to cause a problem. We're going to skip these guys here, okay? Then, when we talk about the second reason that the French Revolution is going to happen, Enlightenment ideas spread. The idea of people being equal, people having natural rights, life, liberty, the right to own property, life, liberty, the right to pursue your own happiness. The French are going to like these ideas because even Voltaire was from France and he was an Enlightenment philosopher. So they're going to like the ideas of democracy, things like that, but they have a king during this time. Louis XVI is a poor leader. Louis XVI mismanages funds. He overtaxed the poor. He has lavish parties at his palace when people are starving. It's going to make everybody very angry. His wife, Marie Antoinette, there's a time when the third estate's going to lose their harvest and they're not going to have food, and she's going to say, oh, well, let them eat cake. They don't have bread, let them eat cake. And, Marie Antoinette's going to have the means to have cake or a fully roasted pig where her people are starving in the streets because they don't have food because they're paying such high taxes. Number 4, France is in financial trouble. Louis XVI is going to mismanage his funds, and they're financially struggling. And if any country is financially struggling, what do? Their people? They typically tax them more. So a couple things we need to talk about. So there's going to be the meeting of the Estates General. So this is going to be where Louis XVI tries to get all of the estates together to meet, and they want to discuss how to help France's financial problem. Well, the third estate suggests reform. So there are representatives from the third estate, and they're like, hey, we need to change this, or, the nobles need to pay more taxes. So maybe the church does. Like, we need to get other people paying taxes because the nobles, because the king was so weak, sometimes they would refuse to pay their taxes. So when they make these suggestions for change, they get kicked out. And so the third estate leaves, and what they do is they have the tennis court oath, which where they go and protest on Louis XVI tennis court in his palace. They also write a constitution of new like laws and things that they want for France. So they create a national assembly. This is the third estate. That's 97% of the population, and they write the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which sounds very similar to the Declaration of Independence if you read it. So what they end up doing is they're going to start to mobilize. So this group of commoners is going to start to mobilize, and they're going to start becoming active because they're angry. They were dismissed at the meeting where they were invited to come and make reforms. Very similar to America where there's no taxation without representation. They're very angry about this. So they storm the Bastille. The Bastille is going to be like a fortress in France that contains weapons. So Louis the 16th asked the army for protection. Paris gets nervous, and the third estate storms the Bastille for weapons. So people actually like get killed. And one thing that they do at the Bastille is there's a guy like a guard at the door. They like cut his head off and stick it on a stake. And the people of the third estate like run around with his head on the stake, like trying to make a point. And so this is going to make Louis XVI very scared. So this is called the Great Fear. And so rumors about the third estate having a punishment from the king. Makes all of the third estate scared for their actions, but also they're going to start to become more violent, which ultimately the third estate's scared, but so is Louis XVI. So here's some tensions that happened during this time. You have tension between the king and the third estate. You have tension between the nobles and the third estate. You have tension between France and Austria and Prussia. King Louis XVI is going to try to be a little bit aggressive with some of his neighbors and try to like take land or pick a fight or start a war, because a lot of times war, gains you revenue. And then mobs are going to break out everywhere in France. So France is chaotic during this time. So the National Assembly, which consisted of the third estate, is going to vote itself out of the Estates General, and they are going to call for a new election of the National Convention. So what they are going to do is pull away, and they are going to set up a republic, which is a representative democracy. And so I want to talk to you really quick about what happens with Louis XVI. So there's this invention during this time called the guillotine, and it's like this thing where you put your head in it and it like cut your head off, okay? And so Louis XVI, as well as his family and his children, Marie Antoinette as well, are going to get their heads put in the guillotine and publicly executed. So they eradicate the monarch, and that's how they start this republic. So they're going to have a representative democracy, very similar to America. The republic, the idea of the republic comes from Rome. So the republic sounds like a great idea. Everybody's kind of on board for the most part, but there's going to be some issues. First of all, they have a leader named Maximilien Robespierre, and he's going to lead the reign of terror. So what he says is either you get with the republic or you gonna die, okay? And so he also likes the guillotine, and so he uses the guillotine and kills 17,000 people, okay? Eventually, though, what's interesting is that Robespierre will also be executed through the guillotine. So guys, it's just like, it reminds me of Rome. Republics are great in theory, and there are a lot of things that can work, but there's downsides to it, and there's fear and terror, and when people aren't on board, just because people don't agree with you doesn't mean you can kill them. So this happens. Then eventually we will have a man named Napoleon. So Napoleon Bonaparte, if you look at this image and you look down at the bottom, I love this picture because it has some like world leader names on there, like Hannibal's on there. Let's see if Miss McCray can get back to where she was. Sorry, zoom in all over the place. Hannibal is compared to, Napoleon is compared to leaders like Hannibal. Remember, we learned about Hannibal fighting against the Romans. So he was considered a great leader or general. But there are going to be some hang-ups with him. So he's a military leader who eventually he wants to become an emperor. And he does this through a coup d'etat, which means that he says, hey, the power that you have is now mine. I'm going to force it on you. And I will also bring the pain if you don't obey. So he tries to expand France. You understand this, though. France and England have a long issue of, like, tit for tat getting along. So he tries to expand France, but he faces England as an enemy. So also, he goes to Russia. This is not the first world leader that will try to go to Russia and get wild pants and try to take over. So he, tries to take over Russia. And, of course, if anybody understands anything about Russian winters, that's not the time to invade Russians, okay? In general, Russians are very strong during this time. And so the Russians push the French back into France. And then he gets exiled to Elba. So Elba is going to be an island where they exile Napoleon Bonaparte. But what's funny is that he's not going to care and he's going to come back. So he comes back for 100 days but loses to England and Prussia in the Battle of Waterloo. And so he leads another like wave of wars trying to create this French empire. And eventually he's exiled to St. Helena and he dies. So the ultimate, thing that I want you to understand from the French Revolution is that they want the same types of freedom as America. They want to get out from under their monarch. But the issue for the French is that they're going to continue to struggle. And we won't get a lot of clarity on the French and their interactions until a little bit later. So we will probably talk more about them when we get to nationalism, which will be our next unit, where they consolidate and centralize their government again and kind of heal. And so we'll get the establishment of like a clear monarch, and then eventually we'll move to prime ministers. But this is just a struggling time, very similar to the American, but a lot of times people don't deem this as successful. So please take a moment if you have any questions.